The sky over my farm cracked open at midnight, and I nearly drove my truck into a ditch trying to see what caused it. A streak of blue fire tore across the clouds, screaming as it fell, and I felt the ground shake under my boots before I even reached the tree line. Smoke rose from the far field, the one behind the old grain silo, and my heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I grabbed a flashlight from the glove box and ran, because that is what you do when something falls out of the sky near your home. You do not wait for someone else to check. The wreckage was small, smaller than I expected. It looked like a metal teardrop, cracked open on one side, hissing steam into the cold night air. The metal was not like anything I had seen before, dark and smooth, with lines of light running through it like veins. I stood there for a moment, frozen, my flashlight shaking in my hand. Then I heard it, a small sound, a whimper. I stepped closer, my boots crunching over burnt grass, and that is when I saw her. She was curled up near the broken shell of the pod, small enough to be a child, with skin the color of pale moonlight and large dark eyes that reflected my flashlight like a cat caught in headlights. Her clothes, if you could call them that, were torn and scorched at the edges. She was shaking, whether from cold or fear I could not tell, and when she saw me she pressed herself against the metal, trying to disappear into it. I should have called someone. I should have called the sheriff, or the news, or maybe even the government. Instead, I knelt down slowly, the way you would with a frightened animal, and I set the flashlight down so it was not pointed at her face. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice low, "I am not going to hurt you." She did not understand me, of course. How could she? But something in my tone must have reached her, because she stopped pressing so hard against the wreckage. Her eyes stayed locked on mine, wide and unblinking, studying me the way you study something you are not sure is dangerous. I noticed a mark on her arm, a burn or a cut. I could not tell in the dark, and it looked painful. Every instinct I had told me to help her, the same instinct that would have kicked in if I had found any hurt child alone in the night. I did not think about where she came from. I did not think about what she was. I only thought about the fact that she was small, and scared, and bleeding, and alone. I took off my jacket slowly and held it out toward her, not moving any closer, letting her decide. For a long moment she just stared at it. Then, inch by inch, she reached out one small hand and touched the fabric like she had never felt cotton before. She pulled it toward herself and wrapped it around her thin shoulders. That was the first time she trusted me with something. It would not be the last. I could not leave her out there in the cold, not with that wreckage smoking behind her and no way of knowing if it would catch fire or worse. So I did the only thing that made sense to me. I picked her up, as gently as I could, and I carried her back to the house. She did not fight me. She held onto my shirt with both hands the entire walk back, her small body trembling against my chest, and I remember thinking that whatever she was, wherever she came from, right now she was just a child who needed someone to keep her safe. Inside the house, I laid her down on the couch and got my old first aid kit from under the sink. The cut on her arm was not too deep, and I cleaned it as carefully as I could, watching her face the whole time for any sign that I was hurting her. She winced once, but she did not pull away. She watched my hands work with an intensity that unsettled me a little, like she was trying to understand not just what I was doing, but why. When I finished bandaging her arm, I offered her a glass of water. She sniffed it first, the way you might expect a wild animal to, before taking a small sip. Then, as if some barrier in her had cracked, she drank the rest of it in one long gulp and looked up at me with something that might have been the beginning of trust. I did not sleep that night. I sat in the chair across from the couch and watched her sleep instead, my mind racing with 1,000 questions I had no answers to. Who was she? Where did she come from? Was anyone looking for her? And more than anything, what was I supposed to do now? By morning, she was awake before me, sitting up on the couch with my jacket still wrapped around her shoulders, watching the sunlight come through the window like she had never seen anything like it. When she noticed me stir, she did not flinch this time. She just looked at me, and for the first time, there was something other than fear in her eyes. Curiosity, maybe, or hope. I made breakfast, simple eggs and toast, and set a plate in front of her. She poked at the food with one finger before copying the way I ate, picking up the toast with her small hands and taking a cautious bite. When she realized it was good, her whole face changed, and I swear I saw something close to a smile. Over the next 2 days, I taught her small words. I pointed at myself and said my name, Daniel, over and over, until she repeated it back in a soft, careful voice that did not sound quite human, but was close enough to understand. I pointed at her and waited, hoping she might tell me her own name, but she only shook her head slightly, like the concept confused her, or like she was not ready to share it yet. I taught her the word for water, and the word for food, and the word for sky, pointing out the window each time until she nodded in understanding. She was quick, faster than any child I had ever seen learn a new language, picking up words after hearing them only once or twice. I began to suspect she was smarter than she looked, and older than her small size suggested. She followed me everywhere around the house, staying close, watching how I did things, mimicking small gestures like the way I nodded when I agreed with something, or the way I patted the dog on the head when he came trotting through the kitchen. My dog, an old golden retriever named Buster, took to her instantly, resting his head in her lap whenever she sat down, and she would run her small fingers through his fur with a gentleness that told me she had a kind heart, wherever she came from. On the third night, I found the wreckage in the field had been cleared away. No trace of it left, no burn marks, nothing. I stood there in the dark, staring at the empty grass, and a cold feeling settled into my stomach. Someone had come and gone without me noticing, which meant someone knew she was here, or knew she had crashed, and that meant it was only a matter of time before more of them came looking. I walked back to the house slower than usual, my mind turning over every possibility, most of them frightening. When I stepped inside, she was standing by the window, staring up at the night sky with an expression I had not seen on her before. Longing, maybe, or worry. I sat down next to her and pointed at the stars, trying to ask, without words, if that was where she came from. She nodded slowly, then pointed at herself and made a small gesture with her hand, sweeping it upward like she was mimicking something falling. I understood. She had fallen from up there, and something told me she had not fallen alone, or by accident. The next morning, I woke to the sound of Buster barking outside, sharp and urgent, the kind of bark that meant something was wrong. I grabbed my jacket and ran outside to find him standing at the edge of the property, staring up at the sky with his hackles raised. There, hanging silent and enormous above the tree line, was a ship unlike anything I had ever imagined. It was easily the size of a small town, smooth and silver, humming with a low sound that I felt more than heard, vibrating through the ground beneath my feet. Panels of light shifted across its surface in patterns that looked almost alive. My heart dropped into my stomach. I turned and ran back inside, and found her already awake, standing near the door, staring toward the window with wide eyes. She looked at me, and I saw fear there again, but also something else. Recognition. "Is that them?" I asked, even though I knew she could not fully understand me. "Did they find you?" She nodded, slow and uncertain, and grabbed my hand with both of hers, holding on tight the way she had that very first night. I did not know what to expect. Part of me wanted to hide her, to protect her from whatever was coming, because in the short time she had been with me, she had become something precious, something I could not imagine handing over to strangers, especially strangers who commanded ships the size of small cities. But another part of me knew that if her people had come looking for her, they were not going to leave without her, and hiding would only make things worse. I opened the front door and stepped outside, keeping her close behind me, my hand still wrapped around hers. Figures began to descend from the ship, moving with a strange grace that made them seem to glide rather than walk. They were tall, taller than any person I had ever seen, dressed in dark armor that caught the morning light like polished glass. Their faces were similar to hers, pale and sharp-featured, but their eyes carried none of her softness. These were soldiers, and they moved with the precision of people who had done this before, fanning out across my field in a formation that made my stomach twist with unease. I stepped in front of her without thinking, my body angling itself between the small girl and the approaching soldiers. I did not have a weapon. I did not have any way to fight back if it came to that. But something in me refused to just stand aside and let armed strangers take a scared child without at least trying to protect her. One of the soldiers raised a hand, and the others stopped moving, holding their position at the edge of my field. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, from the ship, a smaller figure descended, moving slower than the soldiers, wrapped in robes the color of deep night, with markings along the fabric that shimmered faintly even in daylight. As she got closer, I could see her face clearly. It was regal, in a way that was hard to explain, carrying an authority that did not need to be announced. Her eyes swept across the field, across the soldiers, across me, and finally landed on the small girl standing behind me. Something broke in her expression. The composed, powerful mask cracked, just for a moment, and what replaced it was raw, desperate relief. She began walking faster, then almost running, her robes billowing behind her as she crossed the distance between us. The girl let go of my hand and ran forward, meeting the woman halfway, and the two of them collided in an embrace so full of emotion that I felt like I was intruding just by watching it. The woman dropped to her knees in the dirt of my field, wrapping her arms around the small girl, her whole body shaking as she held her close. I stood there, unsure of what to do, watching a reunion I did not fully understand but could feel the weight of anyway. When the woman finally looked up at me, her eyes were wet, and there was something in her expression that had shifted from grief to a sharp, focused attention, now aimed entirely at me. She rose to her feet, still holding the girl's hand, and walked toward me with slow, deliberate steps. The soldiers around the field tensed, hands moving toward whatever weapons they carried, but the woman raised her free hand slightly, and they relaxed, though they did not lower their guard completely. "You," she said, and her voice carried an accent I could not place, each word careful and measured, like she was testing a language she had only recently learned. "You are the one who found her." It was not a question, but I nodded anyway. She was hurt. Scared. I could not just leave her out there. The woman studied me for a long moment, her sharp eyes moving over my face, my clothes, the modest house behind me, as if trying to piece together some puzzle. "You did not report this to your authorities," she said. "You did not attempt to trade her or use her for gain. You simply helped her." "She's a kid," I said, and the words came out simpler than I expected. But they were true. "Doesn't matter where she's from. She needed help. That's it." The girl looked up at the woman and spoke rapidly in a language I did not understand, gesturing toward me, toward the house, toward Buster, who had cautiously wandered closer, sniffing at the hem of the woman's robes. Whatever she was saying, it made the woman's expression soften even further. "She tells me you taught her words," the woman said, "that you gave her your own coat, that you sat awake to watch over her while she slept." I felt a strange embarrassment at hearing my small, ordinary actions repeated back to me through the mouth of someone so clearly powerful. "It wasn't anything special," I said. "Anyone would have done the same." The woman shook her head slowly, and something in her expression told me she did not believe that at all. "Where I come from," she said, "kindness is rarely given without expectation of return. Strength decides who is protected and who is not. A stranger, especially one as small and as vulnerable as her, would not often be shown such care, not without cost." I did not know what to say to that. It felt strange, being told that something as simple as helping a scared, hurt child was somehow rare or remarkable. "Where I came from, it was just what you did. My name is Celine," the woman said finally. "I am the sovereign of my people. This is my daughter Erie. She has been missing for 6 days. We believed after the 3rd day that she had not survived the crash." I looked down at the girl, at Erie, and she looked back up at me with those same wide, dark eyes that had stared at me from the wreckage in my field only days ago. Knowing now who she was, knowing the weight of what her survival meant to the woman standing beside her, made the last few days feel entirely different in my memory, though my actions would not have changed even if I had known from the start. "She's a good kid," I said, "smart, kind to my dog. She'll be all right." Celine's eyes flicked to Buster, who had settled himself at Erie's feet, tail thumping happily against the dirt. Something almost like amusement crossed her face before it settled back into careful composure. "I owe you a debt," Celine said, "that I do not know how to repay. My people do not forget such things. Name what you wish, wealth, protection, knowledge beyond what your world currently holds. It is yours." I thought about it for a moment, standing there in my own field with an alien queen offering me anything I could imagine. Part of me wanted to laugh at how strange my life had become in the span of 3 days, but mostly I just felt tired, and grateful that the little girl I had grown to care for was safe, and going home to someone who clearly loved her. "I don't need anything," I said. "Just take care of her. Make sure she stays safe." Celine studied me for a long moment, as if trying to determine whether I was being foolish or sincere. "That is all you ask?" "That's all I want," I said. "Seeing her safe with you, that's enough." Erie tugged on Celine's robe and said something else, quieter this time, and Celine's expression shifted into something gentler. She knelt down slightly, listening, then looked back up at me. "She says she does not wish to forget you," Celine said, "and she asks if she may return one day, not out of obligation, but because she wishes to." I felt something tighten in my chest, an unexpected warmth at the thought. "Tell her the door's always open," I said. "She's welcome here anytime." Erie smiled then, a real smile, small but genuine, and she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around my waist in a quick, tight hug before pulling back and returning to Celine's side. It was a small gesture, but it carried more weight than anything else that had happened that morning. Celine reached into the folds of her robe and produced a small object, smooth and dark, no bigger than a coin, and pressed it into my palm. "This will allow you to be recognized should you ever wish to reach us," she said. "It is not a gift lightly given. Guard it well." I closed my fingers around it, feeling its strange warmth against my skin. I will, I said. Celine inclined her head toward me, a gesture that felt formal, respectful, entirely different from how she had first approached with her soldiers tense and ready around her. You have shown me something today, she said, something I did not expect to find on a world we know so little about. Perhaps there is more to learn here than we assumed. With that, she turned, guiding Eerie gently by the shoulder back toward the waiting ship. Eerie looked back once, lifting her hand in a small wave, and I lifted mine in return, watching until the two of them disappeared into the ship's glowing entrance. The soldiers withdrew soon after, their formation dissolving as they retreated back toward the ship in that same strange gliding walk. Within minutes, the massive vessel began to rise, silent and smooth, climbing higher and higher until it broke through the clouds and vanished entirely, leaving behind nothing but a faint hum that slowly faded from the air. I stood alone in my field for a long while afterward, Buster leaning against my leg, the morning sun warm on my shoulders. The grass where the ship had hovered was untouched, not a single blade bent out of place, as if the entire encounter had been something I imagined. But the small dark object in my palm was real, its weight solid and undeniable, and the memory of a scared little girl wrapped in my jacket, drinking water like she had never tasted anything so simple and so good, stayed with me clearly enough that I knew none of it had been a dream. I walked back into the house, and the couch still held the faint impression of where she had slept, my jacket still draped over one armrest where she must have left it before stepping outside that morning. I picked it up and held it for a moment, thinking about how strange it was that something so small, so simple as choosing to help a frightened child in the middle of the night, had led to a morning like this one. I did not know if Eerie would ever return, or if the strange coin in my pocket would ever be used. But I knew that somewhere out among those stars she had once pointed toward, there was a little girl who was safe now, who had a home to return to, and who would grow up knowing that somewhere on a small, quiet world, a stranger had chosen to help her simply because she needed it. And maybe that was enough. Maybe, in the end, that was the only thing that had ever mattered.